Hello everyone, my name is Signe Fremel and I am presenting with Anyssa Powell, and we're doing our special topic on supplementation. So should we supplement or just beat it? Here is a general overview of our presentation. Feel free to pause the slide and read through it. To begin our presentation, I just wanted to show you how lucrative the sports nutrition market is. Globally, its amount is about 50 million US dollars in 2022, and most of that is attributed to post-workout supplements, accounting for 35%. And it's estimated that each year that there's going to be about an 8% increase in this market until 2030. I listed the top supplements on the market right now. Protein powders amazingly account for 21.5 billion of the 50 billion. And then we also have creatine, antioxidants, electrolytes, omega-3, branched amino acids, leucine, multivitamins, our nitric oxide or Beets, and then beta alanine. And this is important to know because athletes use supplements more than the general population, and elite athletes are more likely to use them than athletes because they want those minuscule advantages. It's also important to note that although supplements are similar across sexes, athletes as born as female are more likely to use iron, and males are more likely to use vitamin E, protein, and creatine. Now, with all that talk about supplements, you're like, what is a supplement? Well, maybe not. But the funny thing is that the world doesn't really know. There's no universal definition of a supplement, but I believe the Australian Institute of Sport gives a really good definition, which I provided on this slide. It's a single or multi-ingredient product in a different form, like a powder, a liquid, a pill, or a capsule, and it provides a specific dietary nutrient to achieve a specific health and or performance benefit. And the dietary ingredient could be a vitamin, it could be a mineral, it could be an herb, a botanical amino acid, could be live microbiota, such as prebiotics or probiotics. Well, prebiotics aren't live. Sorry about that. And then there's also macronutrients that could provide extra energy. And it's important to know that supplements can be further classified based on their regulatory term, their physical form, the source that they come from, their claim and function, the effectiveness and the evidence that the supplement has. And supplements can get really messy super fast because we have sports foods, we have medical supplements, we have functional supplements, there's fortification, there's performance supplements. So there's just a lot of claims around supplements. And I wanted to provide also a definition for aerogenic aids because usually these are used interchangeably, but it's not necessarily the same thing. It's kind of like over an umbrella. So it's like a mechanical, nutritional, pharmacological, physiological, or psychological tool to increase energy performance and recovery. So I thought that was important to list on the slide as well. On this slide, I just wanted to highlight that supplements come in many forms. And again, that's one way that they are classified. You can pause the slide. Feel free to read through them. I'm just going to make a couple of points. Hope the slide doesn't give you a headache too. The capsules, I put a star next to them because that's the most abundant form on the market. Important to know that tablets and capsules are different, even though they're used interchangeably a lot. Tablets are a hard pill of hard powder that's compressed, while capsules are either a gelatin or cellulose casing that contains a liquid or powder. It's important to note that our vegans are not going to want the gelatin ones, the gelatin casing, as well as gummies. They could have gelatin in them as well. The Beets, they indicate what forms that a BEET supplement or nitric oxide supplement may come in. I wanted to highlight too that there's a couple new ones on here you might have not seen before, which is liposomal, IV therapy, and transdermal. And I wanted to highlight that one of our special topic groups did mention IV vitamin therapy with ferric carbomaltose with iron. So if you have a severe iron deficiency, that might be something your athlete does. So yeah. So just to put words into pictures and maybe give you more headaches, this is kind of little examples of what each form could look like. Another important thing to think about when we are talking about supplements is bioavailability, which is the degree and rate at which the metabolite enters our circulatory system, i.e. the blood, and then to the site of action. And we have to consider the supplements form, as we previously went through in the last two slides, as well as the molecular form of the metabolite, which micronutrients can come in different forms. We'll talk about that in the next slide. But but depending on which form, they might be better taken with food or without food, on an empty stomach, an hour before eating something. So that's like why it's important with nutrient timing. We learned that about calcium and iron in the previous topics we went over. Food and beverage intake again, multi-supplementation, another thing to consider when we're talking about bioavailability of a supplement. And the graphic below just gives a nice little representation of bioavailability. Food is obviously the king. It's the most bioavailable source, something that you're going to get. Sublingual sprays come next, and so do injections, sublingual drops, and gummy bears, capsules, pills. So it's interesting because they're more bioavailable, the top 2, 3, because they go straight into the circulation through the sublingual glands and can go straight into the bloodstream instead of going through the first pass metabolism and being processed by the liver. And that's kind of contributing to why they are more bioavailable. So here are some examples of where bioavailability may be important to consider with an athlete or non-athlete. And it includes calcium, iron, and vitamin B12. We can find calcium in 2 different metabolite forms in supplements, one being calcium carbonate, which is less expensive, more abundant, and is recommended to be taken with food due to its related GI distress it causes. And then calcium citrate, which is a little more expensive. It causes less GI distress. So if you have an athlete who is more prone, this might be the better supplement for them. And it doesn't require food intake with it. Dosing of calcium and timing of it is also important to consider. As we learned in previous presentations and courses, we can't absorb more than 400 and 500 milligrams in one supplement dose. So that's why it's recommended to take 2 to 3 times throughout the day just to get optimal absorption. And also we should space out calcium supplementation from iron and caffeine due to their interactions. And vitamin D and magnesium are friends of calcium. They help the bioavailability of this nutrient and also help each other out. We have iron as well to consider, which again, female athletes are likely to use. And this comes in ferrous sulfate and ferrous fumarate. It's usually recommended to take these supplements on an empty stomach for more increased bioavailability. However, it can be taken with food if the athlete is more prone to GI distress. Iron can come in a liquid and pill form, so it might depend on the preference of your athlete, but again, liquid is going to be more bioavailable. Dosing and timing. So vitamin C, ascorbic acid, is the most bioavailable form, as we learned in the class lecture, and it helps iron out just like vitamin D helps calcium. And it's usually recommended to take iron 1 to 2 hours before or after meals. We also have vitamin B12, which I want to include because we might have a vegan or vegetarian athlete. It's important to know methylcobalamin and adeno. So cobalamin come from animal sources. They're the ones in the body. It's what cyanocobalamin is converted to. It's the most bioavailable form because of this. And cyanocobalamin is the synthetic form that is fortified in our foods and often in vegan supplements. Hydrocobalamin is another one I wanted to include because we're talking about IV therapies. And this one is a prescription one, super bioavailable, helps very quickly. You're not usually going to see that one as often. And I noted that there's a diagram on the right showing where supplements are more likely to be absorbed. It's important to note that supplements could list enteric coating so that it can make it to the small intestine and be protected. That also makes them more bioavailable. We should always promote the food first, supplement second approach with our athletes. The picture below with the pyramids kind of show you what the supplement companies want you to think. But really what the evidence shows is that a proper diet and is a good foundation for good health and athletic performance. And it's unfortunate, although athletes recognize that diet has an important role in their performance, it could be difficult for them to consume those foods based on their training schedule and all the day-to-day things that they have to get done. Consuming a diet that supports training, recovery, and good health is also a long-term investment, and the benefits aren't really seen on a day-to-day basis. And I know that supplements can offer that quick fix, and that might lure athletes to take supplements. And it's important before an athlete considers taking a supplement, though, that they see a health professional or a sports registered dietitian just to make sure that they have this solid foundation of a diet down, their sleep and their training schedule down before considering the supplement. And that's why I included the My Plate tool above, just to show that diet can vary throughout the training, and having the same thing all the time is probably not going to be beneficial for an athlete either. A health professional can also help athletes go through the cost-effective benefit of supplements because, as we learned, it's a very lucrative, expensive market. But yeah, ultimately for any individual to physically perform at their best, a nutritionally adequate diet with sufficient hydration is crucial. And the MyPlate tool is a very helpful tool that we can use to promote this food first, supplement second approach. Food is the most bioavailable form of nutrients as well. So yeah, as we learned in class, athletes require more food, more calories to replenish, especially carbohydrates, to replenish those glycogen stores, around 3 to 10 grams per kilogram of their weight, protein 1.2 to 2 grams of kilograms of their weight, and 20 to 35% of the calories in their diet should come from fat. And we should promote that their food has variety so that it can provide all those macro and micronutrients in a balanced way that will support their performance and health goals ultimately. So supplementation for the athlete. It's best in conjunction with a nutrition plan that's balanced, again, as previously stated, and rarely effects of supplementation are seen outside of the conditions of an adequate and balanced diet. So why an athlete might take supplements is to support and meet their nutritional goals. Again, if they have a busy lifestyle, they need to get that quick fix around exercise and to replenish their stores because, as we learned, exercise stress reduces our nutrient levels in the body, and reduced absorption and intake also is needed with age. So if we're working with a more older population, it might be helpful for them to get a more nutrient dense dose of something into their system. And maybe the athlete might have a medical condition in which a supplement can help them achieve their nutrition goals. Nutrient deficiencies, unless conditions, again, that will help the athlete in betterment of their health and get that solid foundation in. The direct enhancement of specific nutrients, which we'll go over. There's a couple nutrients that have some evidence that may help with athletic performance. And then the indirect impact on performance. Maybe it will help them with their training, their sleep, their body composition, and also support their immune system. And also the placebo effect is something that we don't really mention that often. An athlete might feel good when they know that they got the supplement in, and that might be what they need to mentally perform at their best. So there might be some supplementation indicated in athletes that follow specific diets. On the slide, I listed a few that were mentioned in our book. So vegan and vegetarian diets, lacto-ovo, they might require more vitamin B12, D, iron, calcium, and zinc, as well as creatine, since that's only from animal sources like B12. And a vegan vegetarian diet requires a lot of planning. An athlete who may begin this or be new to it may inadvertently have low calorie intake or protein intake. So thus, it's important that these athletes seek nutritional advice from a professional so that they can be helped with their not only nutrition and health goals, but their goal to maintain this diet in a way that's going to help them perform at their optimal. Gluten-free diets, very popular in the health world, but also it's an anecdotal thing most of the time. But celiac and thyroid diseases like hypothyroidism are important to think about with gluten-free diets. And they also pose with some risk of nutrient deficiencies due to the lack of fortification in the gluten-free products that their gluten counterparts do have. Nutritional quality of gluten-free foods also lacks. It has less fat, more sugars in most cases. So it's important to take that into note. Low carb and high fat diets like keto or Atkins are very popular as well in some athletes. The majority of the time, this is a short-term thing when they're training low. I know Ms. Lyons talked about this in one presentation, if you can recall. And long-term benefits, the metabolic adaptations that increases the use of fat for energy and might be something interesting for endurance athletes. But this, again, poses a lot of risk for nutrition deficiencies that are kind of related to a gluten-free diet in the same way of a lack of fortification and not even consuming carbohydrates, but also deficiency risk of selenium, magnesium, phosphorus, and the B vitamins as well as C vitamins, because they're not getting in like fruits and vegetables as much. I may sound like a broken record, but we do need to consider that supplementation more does not equal better, and that we have different forms of vitamins, and that these could lead to toxicity if over supplemented, even with minerals as well. But for the sake of this presentation, I'm just going to do a little overview of the different water and fat-soluble vitamins and how these toxicities can affect a performance. So we can think about water-soluble vitamins. We need to replenish them daily. We lose them through our urine, sweat, perspiration, and respiration, as discussed in previous topics. Two that I wanted to highlight were vitamin C and vitamin B12. Vitamin C can cause some GI distress and diarrhea, so it's important to know that. And then vitamin B12 can mask anemias. Fat soluble wise, we have our vitamin A and vitamin D as well as E. I've listed their upper tolerable limits on the slide, but A can compromise bone health, which we know is important in athletes. D can lead to hypercalcemia, which our last special topic highlighted about, and coma as well. And then vitamin E can cause nerve and muscle weakness. So you can imagine how these can have some detrimental impacts on our athletes. This may look a little familiar from early on in this semester when we went through the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics position statement. On that statement, they had a list of dietary supplements and sport foods that currently have evidence-based use in sports nutrition. This list was adopted from the Australian Institute of Sport. It's called the ABCD grading system / classification system. And it's important to note that this system only grades on single ingredient supplements, not multi-ingredient supplements or brands, because brands or multi-ingredient supplements could be listed as a propriety blend or include ingredients that aren't listed on the label. So this just supports single ingredient. We start with sports foods and medical supplements in Group A. The ABCD grade system works in the way that A has the most evidence and D has the least, or is listed on the banned supplement list declared by either NCAA or WADA, which is the World Anti-Doping Association. So sports foods, these could be useful for athletes who have GI concerns and just need something like a quick fix before their race or competition, before training and or after. And then we have medical supplements. I put a star next to this because we might have those athletes that are following a specific diet, or maybe they have a medical condition preventing them from absorbing the proper amount of micronutrients or nutrients in general. These can be helpful to help them meet their foundational nutrition needs to function at their best in performance sport-wise and in life-wise health. So to continue with Group A, we have our performance supplements now. Following the sports foods and the medical supplements, we have our performance supplements. These, again, are practical, scientific evidence supports them, says that they're safe, they're permitted and effective in sports performance in some cases. Not for all, because, it's very individualized. So creatinine, caffeine, sodium bicarbonate, beta-alanine, beetroot juice / nitric oxide, beets. But yeah, these are the ones that have some evidence to support them. As you can see, most of them help with short bouts of exercise, as well as prolonging exercise. I did list the risk of some of these supplements on the Performance Supplement Group A list on the right, and you're more than welcome to go through them. But for the purpose of time, I'm going to continue. As previously mentioned, this is a grading system from most supported with evidence to least supported with evidence, with Group D including substances that are banned by WADA and or NCAA, since they are distinct. I just wanted to give you insight because Group B and C do contain some of the ingredients or supplements we talked about in our journal clubs. So take a moment and look over this slide and investigate. On this slide, I outlined some resources you and your athlete can use just to see the safety, efficacy, and to see if supplements are banned for the sport. So we have our third-party testing, batch testing companies. I listed the pictures that you may see on the supplement label on the slide as well. We have the National Institute of Health, Office of Dietary Supplements. They have a great database evaluating the efficacy and safety of some supplements. We have the Australian Institute of Sports, which we've mentioned a couple times already. They have the wonderful ABCD classification system and also a great position statement if you want to look more into it. We have the Gatorade Sports Science Institute, which is super cool, didn't know it existed, has a lot of science on the efficacy and dosing of sports supplements. And then we have our last two, which are more regulatory. They have the prohibitive list, WADA, like supplements that you get banned from sport, and then the NCAA bylaws as well. They're similar but not the same. Important to know this. And the NCAA for students, it prohibits muscle building supplements like CLA, which you might see at grocery stores or pharmacies, and HMB. It also prohibits caffeine. So just important to know. So WADA prohibited list. I'm kidding. Again, another pun. But this is a list that's updated annually, mentioned on the last slide. It is something that we can refer to as a resource to see if a supplement is on the prohibited list. It's also in Group D of the AIS ABCD grading system. The WADA list is not the same as NCAA's, but NCAA does get some information, or they both kind of talk to each other. I wanted to show you that this list is a little more complex than it may put out. It has prohibited substances for all times in competition and in a specific sport, which I found interesting. You may see some of the substances on here that look familiar that have been used for diseases, which takes me to my next point. There might be athletes that require a substance on this list, and on the next slide, I'm going to show you what they can do. So if an athlete has a medical diagnosis that requires a WADA prohibited list item, they are allowed to get granted a therapeutic use exemption. And that's just important to know if you're working with an athlete with unique needs. So what does the athlete need to know? The athlete needs to know that supplements are minimally regulated, and this is due to the DASHA Act of 1994, which essentially says that the FDA does not have the authority to test the effectiveness, the dose, and approve the labeling of a supplement before it's put onto the market. So that means supplements have really low transparency, and it's also important to let our athletes know that the nutrition label is not the same as what you'd see on a food label because it's not regulated by the FDA. We need to inform our athletes that a supplement could cause them to have a positive drug test and the loss of eligibility in a sport. This could be more than a year, and for our student athletes, they could lose scholarships. It could be a life-changing event. There's also limited evidence on the effectiveness of supplements we should let our athletes know, and that they should avoid questionable claims and miracle claims made on supplement labels. I said the exception of creatine because it's been shown to only have a minuscule of 1 to 3% benefits on athletic performance, but it has a lot of evidence behind it. So again, we risk the contamination, the impurity, and undeclared ingredients on supplement list that could be on the banned substance list of WADA and NCAA bylaws. There also could be an ineffective dose declared on it, which means it's not very cost effective or ethical for our athletes. Athlete is 100% responsible, whether it was unintentional or deliberate, if they dope or had one of the banned substances in their supplement. So it's important to inform our athletes that they should take a zero-risk approach by doing a food-first approach, covering their bases there before they consider supplementation. So no supplements are free of anti-doping risk. So let's navigate a nutrition label for a supplement. I first wanted to put your attention to the FDA disclaimer that's circled on the supplement. So that just means, again, the FDA does not regulate the supplement before it goes onto the market. So number one, that's the serving size. So we look at what's required, and we need to question, is that the effective dose? The serving size might be different than the directions of use on 4, which might describe an effective dose. We also have our percent DV, the daily values, which are similar to food label because they compare it on a 2,000 kcal diet. The crosses, which I didn't know, they just mean that there's no upper limit or RDA for value for that supplement or ingredient. Then we have our ingredients. This is distinct from a food label because a supplement can list ingredients in any order they so please. They don't need to order it in most to least. Directions of use, again, just tells you this is how many capsules you need to take, this is how much at one time, or with a meal, without a meal. Then principal display panel, this tells you the name, how the supplement identifies. So is it this one's a fish oil supplement, right? On number 5, it could be just dietary supplement. You also have to say the amount in the container. We have 180 soft gels in this container. Then health and functional claims. This is one that trips a lot of people up. We have health claims, structure, and functional claims. They can be allowed, but nothing can say that it heals or treats anything. So we can't do any therapeutic claims on labels. So we need to inform athletes if that's being made on a label, that's just not right. We also have our certifications, like if they're third party or purity tested, and I circled that on the label as well. So you have an athlete who is persistent on taking a supplement, or the athlete is meeting their needs and you think they might benefit from a supplement. We want to first ask these 5 essential questions, and these questions were also listed in our book, but it's important that these questions are walked through with a health professional or a sports dietitian, like even before the supplement is being used with an athlete. So the first question is it legal? Is it on the NCAA bylaws or WADA list? Because many athletes do not realize that dietary supplements are loosely regulated. And it's important to inform the athlete that federal law does not ensure the safety and effectiveness of any dietary supplement, and that dietary supplements could contain a banned substance on this list, whether it's indicated or not, and if it's third-party testing. It's kind of a really big risk. Also, is it ethical for the athlete to take the supplement? Is it cost effective? Can they afford it? Is it better than buying the food that might supply those nutrients that they seek? Is it pure? So again, third-party testing. Did they get tested? Does the ingredient list really present what's in the product? Is it safe? Is there grass ingredients in it? Does it cause adverse side effects that might even be more detrimental to your athletic performance? And then is it effective? Is it on group A? Does it have evidence to support its use in sport?
Hey everyone, before we dive into nitric oxide, what exactly it is, I want to show you a list of nitrate rich foods that we can get because we always want to get things in their most natural form. And beets themselves, the skin of the beet, has the most nutrients. So we really want to encourage people to eat in the most natural form. We know that beetroot juice is effective because research has taken beetroot juice and compared it to a nitrate depleted beetroot juice, and they were able to conclusively say it is the nitrates that's helping with the athletic performance. We will be discussing beetroot juice because that's what the research covered. However, I want to point out the difference between the juice and the powder. The juice, 22 grams of sugar. The powder is 2 grams of sugar. When I have 1 cup of juice, I'm having just over 2 beets. When I have 1 tablespoon of powder, I'm having 3 beets. Is too much of a good thing or a bad thing? In the case of our nitrates, the recommended daily intake is 3.7 milligrams per kilogram of body weight. And a nitrosamine is when there's too much nitric oxide in the system, it will cause a hole at our DNA so that when we go into cellular biogenesis and we start creating new cells, there are holes in our cells that can't fill themselves, and it typically turns into cancer. We see a lot of this in research with nitrates and nitrites of our lunch meat. However, our meats are having preservatives added to it, and it's not naturally occurring nitrate, as in with the beetroot juice. Excessive nitric oxide concentrations can cause muscle wasting syndrome, acute kidney injury, unfavorable hemodynamics like tissue damage, capillary leak, and organ failure. It can affect the liver, it can affect your fertility. So, we do want to proceed with caution whenever we're making these recommendations. Nitric oxide is water soluble and it is an inorganic compound. I recommend you go ahead and pause this slide and just briefly look at all the different things that nitric oxide affects in your body and know that everything's still not listed on here. There are several ways in which we get nitric oxide into our body, but it is inorganic, which means we have to make it and we can't survive without it. So it's important to note, and it's not on there, but gee whiz information. When we breathe in through our nose, you're breathing in nitrogen. In the perisinal cavity, nitric oxide is being produced and then sent to the rest of the body. Now, for dietary purposes, when we are eating a nitrate, and I want you to look on the left side under exogenous, we have a green circle. That NO3 is nitrate. The NO2 is nitrite, and the NO is the nitric oxide. So we're working our way to there. I ate my nitrate rich food. And then in the salivatory glands, there is an oral anaerobic bacteria, and it uses the nitrate reductase enzyme to break down about 20% to then be sent down to the stomach. Eating nitrate, you make nitrite. Nitrate goes to the stomach. There is no enzyme. It is just the acidity that is going to break it down then into nitric oxide. This will be sent to the intestines, so it can be dispersed to the rest of the body through the bloodstream. There's about 60 to 70% that is excreted through the kidneys. And then in the bloodstream, one of the big roles, especially for exercise, of nitric oxide is making the blood vessels bigger because there's a ton of shear stress that's being sent from the heart. We're trying to push as much blood as we can through. It's pushing on the walls of the arteries and the veins. And with this nitric oxide, it's giving a little more relaxation. So then about 25% is then reabsorbed into the salivatory glands for storage and to be used again. The rest of the nitric oxide is going to be in the bloodstream and the muscles so that we can use it as needed. On the right side, we're looking at endogenous. So what about the stuff that's already in the body? How am they then turning into nitric oxide? L-arginine is going to be our driving factor. So if you look at the far right picture with all the circles showing the steps of our metabolic process, the arginine is going to enter into the vascular endothelial cell. It is then going to use nitric oxide synthase to break off the nitric oxide, which will leave us with nitric oxide and L-citrulline. The nitric oxide will then go into the vascular smooth muscle. And if you continue to follow the trail, one of the things I want to point out is that the calcium that is inside the muscle cell goes inside the sarcoplasmic reticulum. And this is what causes the muscle to relax. Nitric oxide's role in skeletal muscle is vasodilation, making sure that we're able to pump more through, the regulation of blood flow and VO2. Are we able to regulate the flow? Are we able to utilize these products properly? Mitochondrial biogenesis, we saw that when we were looking at nitrosamines. Mitochondrial respiration, how well is my mitochondria functioning? Glucose and calcium uptake. Research has been done on diabetics. And then also they found that vitamin C helps with the absorption of nitric oxide. And muscle contraction and relaxation. In a research article of volleyball players, they put them through exercise induced muscle damage. And then 48 hours later, which we all know that 2 days after exercising is the worst, there was a significant reduction in swelling and complaint of symptoms by the athletes. Economy, efficiency, and fatigue are all the name of the game on how we're going to be able to perform better. And long-term supplementation of beetroot juice has shown that it helps with actin myosin bridging. So I talked about shear stress a little while ago, and looking in the middle at our blood vessel, I want my muscles to be really nice and big to push all of the oxygen through, as opposed to smaller and cutting off where there's a lot of pressure that's tearing up those arteries and there's not as much nutrients making their way through. Several factors that can affect your nitric oxide formation are listed, and I want to point out a few in particular that you may see. Mouthwash before a race or even a prolonged use of mouthwash will affect how your nitrates are made into nitrites because it kills off the bacteria that's doing the work for you. The other things we can look at is the proton pump inhibitors. If somebody has GERD, and acid reducing medication, is there high acidity in the stomach? As we change that acidity and we lower it, that's going to affect the formation of nitric oxide. Compared to the studies of beneficial effects, the amount of data and literature on the negative effects of beetroot juice is limited. There are twice as many studies demonstrating no performance enhancing effect of nitrate supplementation, despite the growing number of studies demonstrating augmented performance with supplementation. It takes 75 minutes after ingestion for it to start to have an effect in the bloodstream, and then about 2 hours before it reaches its peak. Animal studies showed nitrate concentration is greatest in the muscle instead of blood and was depleted during high intensity exercises. What I liked is there was a lot of different demographics that were reviewed. And the same problem we have in a lot of instances is the pool was very small. So we looked at anywhere from 6 to 20 participants. The parameters tested, there was a lot, whether it was through the bloodstream, whether it was through performance, or it was subjective, and we asked them how they felt. They looked at the difference of aerobic versus anaerobic, the amount of time that it takes, because if this is a long duration, it's not going to have a great impact. And then ambient oxygen concentration or hypoxia, that is our high altitudes. My muscle can be hypoxic, which then means I do need nitric oxide to do its work so that it can get oxygen. But in high altitudes, there was a research article that they looked at a control at sea level. Then they put them at a high altitude that was simulated, and they did a placebo versus the beetroot juice. Beetroot juice did have a good representation of what it could do for us in performance compared to the other two. However, it was a simulated hypoxic environment. So what would have happened if we had gone there, we'd acclimated first, or what if I had gone there and gotten off the plane and then went to run a couple miles? How much different would nitric oxide then affect my performance? So there's further research to be done. 0.5 to 1.5% improvement is shown to be a beneficial ergogenic, and beetroot juice is equivalent to 3%, except in highly trained athletes. That's the only one we see that they have refined their aerobic system so well that we're not able to make any more adaptations that could be beneficial to them. Now, with that 3%, we can also see the same effect if somebody gets a new pair of shoes that they're able to function in better. So keep that in mind. Submaximal to maximal sprints are going to be the best place to look at using beetroot juice. And these are activities that can last less than 5 or 15 minutes. And the shorter the activity, the more benefit we did see. Because whole vegetables have been shown to have health benefits, whereas nitrates from other sources may have detrimental health concerns, it would be prudent for individuals seeking performance benefits to obtain nitrates from whole vegetables such as beetroots.
Now let's take the 5 questions to a practical situation and say that our athlete is interested in taking beets or nitric oxide. So first we'd ask, is it legal? It's not on the WADA list and it's not in the NCAA bylaws. So yeah, it's also part of Group A in the EBCD classification system. Is it ethical? This is more considering what is the harms on human participants, which they haven't found any, and is if it is cost effective to the athlete. So is it more expensive versus the benefits? Like, does it give me benefits and is it worth the expense? And it's usually $1.50 to 75 per serving. So again, individual preference. We'll look at the next slide to see just how expensive a beetroot supplement can be. Is it pure? So has it been third party tested? And that's always not a guarantee. As previously mentioned, we'll look at this on the next slide as well. Is it safe? Beetroot nitric oxide currently does not have any severe adverse side effects, but has been shown to cause a little bit of GI distress and discolor the urine, which could make it difficult to see if an athlete is dehydrated. And also, nitric oxide in beets could be in multi-ingredient pre-workouts with beta-alanine, L-citrine, and caffeine. It's important to mention caffeine because NCAA does not allow caffeine, while WADA does. And is it effective? It's on the AIS Group A, so it has its endurance benefits, but it's hard to say if these benefits have been seen in elite athletes. So it's important to consider what type of athlete you're also working with in the ethical and cost effective side of things as well. On this slide, I listed some third-party supplements of nitric oxide and beets. Kind of gave you a little breakdown of if they're third-party tested, what the serving size is, and what the price is. Maybe if they have claims like they're organic, gluten-free, that might be appealing to your athlete. The flavor as well. So yeah.
In conclusion, eat your vegetables first. What you eat affects your performance, and supplements have a better effect when properly fueled by your diet. Be aware of where you obtain your supplements and consult a professional. For power athletes, greater than 70 milliliters could enhance speed and muscular endurance. For instance, a basketball player who's getting ready to perform in 2 hours, this is one of the highest intensity parts of the game, is the beginning of the game. And we know that these supplements don't have a long lasting effect. It's a short window. So I would recommend that they take it 2 hours before. For endurance athletes, we want to increase the exercise tolerance or time to fatigue when exercise is performed at the higher rates. And this is going to be 6 to 8 millimoles over 6 days. So taking it acutely, taking it once, isn't going to have that much effect. However, if I take it 1 to 6 days, it begins to build in the system and I have a nice supply to come back to. Thank you for listening to our presentation, and please review our handout and our social media posts in the next 2 slides.